Okay, so we're going to give it 2 more seconds before we get started. Like I said, there's a delay on some of the platforms. All right, I think this is perfect. So, hello and welcome to episode 106 of the Environmental Answers podcast. My name is Tiana Alame. I'm your host. I'm here doing some research specifically on the environmental industry, understanding the clarity that we need on what's what when it comes to the environmental answers. Today, I'm joined by Jessica Auck. It's good to see you, Jessica.
Hi,
It's been
Tiana.
a
Thanks for
minute since
having
we've
me.
connected. How are things going?
Things are going really well. Back to renewable energy. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of actually connecting with Jessica when we worked in large scale construction. She has now moved into the renewable energy space. So today we'll have the opportunity to learn more about her experience and journey thus far. So, Jessica, I really wanted to start with a general question about like your background and what brought you to here and now. Like, could you give us a little bit about your career?
Sure. Um, I think I'd like to preface it with just about everyone I know in renewable energy comes from an unexpected place because back in the day, they didn't have programs at universities to prepare you for renewable energy. So we all tend to come to renewable energy from surprising origins. I came to it as an archaeologist. So I was a historian and archaeologist, and I ended up working as an archaeological monitor during construction on a utility scale solar project deep in the California desert. And it was during that particular project that my career went interdisciplinary, and I found myself paying attention to all of the resources, environmental resources on site, biological, paleontological. I was also the air quality manager because why not? Look at dirt on the ground, look at dirt in the air, same difference. Um, and I really enjoyed learning about renewable energy and all of the moving parts of it, all the political policy behind it, and kind of geeked out on it. And I left that space probably not because I wanted to. I really wanted to stay in renewables, but the industry itself has had some peaks and valleys, and so I had to go where the work was, and so ultimately left renewables for a while, and then about close to 5 years ago now, I re-entered, but not from my usual construction management space, more from a development perspective and project origination, greenfielding, which really allowed me to look at projects from every single perspective that occurs in developing these projects and bringing them to fruition. So it's kind of like I got to work on the cradle side of things. And now I'm back to working on the grave side of things, which not really grave, but bringing it to fruition, actually getting to see these projects get built and commissioned and come online.
I know that's a common term, like in like construction, like cradle to grave. But like, what do you mean, like from beginning to end? I know some of the audience might be like, "Huh, I've never heard that phrase before." So, what do you mean by that?
So I've gotten to be on the cradle side a few times, including developing the environmental impact reports, or even earlier than that, informing the environmental impact reports, because as an archaeologist, I would go out and do the phase one surveys. And those surveys then inform the reports, which then informs how everything gets developed afterwards. So that's the very early stage kind of thing. Development of mitigation programs and plans to enact during construction. Those are all very early planning stage kind of tasks. And then on the other side of that, you get the fun part, which is playing with the Tonka toys out in the middle of nowhere and building these sites.
So, when it comes to your career, have you always been located in California, or have you done this work across the country?
Well, education wise, my career's been kind of all over the place. I got my master's degree in England,
Okay.
um, and that was in historical archaeology of the modern world, which focused on post colonial areas, which California happens to be a post colonial area. It's colonized by Spain. So I came back to the States and wrote my thesis on a site in San Diego County. And I think my first dig was in the Central Valley of California, called a place called White Wolves Preserve. And then mostly professionally, I worked throughout California and then did archaeology in Nevada a little bit. But then when I was on the project origination side of things, I oversaw, excuse me, all of WEC, which WEC is a utility conglomerate, right? And so that is Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah. I think I got them all.
Okay, my only question was, is it Kansas? Like, what's the, is there a K in WEC? It sounds like you said it all. But yeah, no, that's pretty cool that you know all of what was in that. But that makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, so I had to get myself familiarized with the utilities throughout that entire area and the resources and how to develop projects everywhere.
That makes sense. No, that's really cool. So could you talk to us a little bit more about like what it is that you're doing now? I know you brought us through the history of your career thus far, but what are you working on now? Could you give us a little insight on that?
Sure. So I'm currently working for a utility scale solar developer, primarily focused in the West, doing quite a bit of Southwest region projects. So I'm involved in the ongoing construction of 2 projects in Southern California, one in Imperial County, one in Kern/San Bernardino County in the Mojave. And then also involved in the development of some other projects in San Bernardino and Imperial counties, and at least one in Nevada. So
Those are
that one's on BLM land. So that's kind of an interesting challenge too.
Okay, so that's location. But could you tell me a little bit more about like the energy role? Like we decided to name this episode about what's the impact. So I'm curious about like what is the energy work that you're doing, and then like what's the impact that you see in your daily work?
So the energy work that we're doing is we're trying to get additional energy resources on the grid. And I think what folks tend to not recognize is just how big the appetite for energy is, period, regardless of the source of the energy. And so right now, I think some statistics that I read, we're increasing the appetite by 3% year over year, and it's expected to double by 2050. So we're already using a lot of energy to keep our lives running in general, but it's supposed to double in the next 25 years. And, some of the things that are driving that is electric vehicles, pun intended, driving electric vehicles. But also public transportation too, because a lot of municipal buses, trams, metro networks are relying on renewable energy, electric vehicles to keep transportation going. We also have an increase in industrial and manufacturing facilities, and a lot of those places are trying to generate their own energy just to kind of keep up. So I've worked with some companies that have put a couple of turbines on a property or installed some solar panel, either adjacent to the property or on the rooftop of the property, so that these facilities can run independently and also meet their corporate sustainability goals. Data centers, so artificial intelligence, crypto mining, all takes incredible amount of energy resources. And that's just growing every day, the use of it, and it's just going to increase. There's also the response to climate change. So as we have wackier and wackier weather, we are going to have more heating and cooling of residences and businesses. to keep up with, and that all takes energy off the grid, as well as population growth. So we keep growing as a species, and we keep using more resources. And also, policy wise, there's mandates to lower emissions, and that really impacts, that really draws on the need for renewable energy specifically, because those mandates say, yeah, you need to get this much energy, but this portion of it or amount needs to come from renewable energy specifically. So we're just trying to keep up at this point. I mean, a renewable energy project takes about like 3 times the amount of time as a manufacturing facility to develop. So just trying to keep up is already falling behind. So it's just, the appetite is just so strong.
Yeah, for the energy. I know within my master's project, I focused on specifically like interconnection. So when you talked about like the grid and needing more power and getting these renewable energy resources online, like one, it takes time. A part of that is just like some of those systems haven't been modernized, I think, or upgraded to have the capacity to have renewable energy come on board. And so, who's going to pay for it is some of the issues I've seen. And then like, how is it going to work? And, is it going to be the developers? Is it the local municipalities? Who's going to pay for these upgrades? Because we need a lot of them throughout the entire country. And I do want to reflect back on the point that, a lot of your work is in the Western interconnection, right? So like, I learned through my research, there's like the Western part, and then there's like the Eastern, and then there's like Texas. And something that I found interesting is that like ERCOT has its own thing going on for it.
It's its own thing.
Kudos to them for figuring out what they've been able to figure out. But a lot of times it's like, where does it leave the rest of us? And I'm more curious about why you feel like this is really important for people to get into energy. I heard you earlier list all these like job opportunities. It seems like there's a lot of opportunities to work on so many things. So like, what is your perspective about like maybe even going back to like why you came, but seeing the importance of getting into the space?
Well, I think it's important to point out that there's almost a space for anyone. Like I said, almost everyone I know in renewable energy came from somewhere else. And there's so many moving parts in that. There's supply chain, and there's accounting, and there's GIS, and people who understand land use and management and public policy and government affairs. I mean, there's just about any discipline you come from, there's going to be a place for you in renewable energy. So I definitely encourage people to try to join up, because I think it's an exciting industry, and for as many peaks and valleys as there might be in the industry, I think it has a future for sure. But I'm sorry, did that, your question specifically was?
No, that was very, very clear. I would say that I had a lot of points within the question that I asked, mainly because like you have shared so much perspective on like how the industry is forming. And something that's important for like some of the listeners is just understanding, is there a space for me in renewable energy? I mean, I see that there's a lot of work and opportunity. So I appreciate you bringing that up for us. I guess another follow-up question was just understanding how your particular industry and space connects to like sustainability and some of the goals you mentioned earlier when it came to like, I guess, climate change and us addressing that. Any thoughts that you have on like defining sustainability within the energy space?
Oh, that's a lot. So, at the very beginning of it, what we're providing by providing renewable energy resources is fighting climate change and the existential threat it presents. So no matter what impacts we have to other resources, like overall, we're bringing a positive change, a sustainable change, because we can't just go back to being a non-electrically charged society. Like, that's never going to happen. Well, we hope it doesn't happen, because I think we would call that apocalypse, right? So we have to balance out, how do we continue to progress and use the technologies that we have and continue to invent new technologies, bring ingenuity to the table, and also provide the resource we need to keep all that moving. So
Nice.
that's really where it becomes kind of that's a big crux of the sustainability, but
Hmm.
also just the fact that we're able to do it without burning coal in the
Hmm.
meantime, or without relying completely on oil and gas. I worked on an oil spill cleanup at one point in my career, and that definitely impressed upon me just how negatively impactful reliance on that resource can be. And there's also, if we all want wherever we live to be a place that is economically viable and has a strong future. And part of having renewable energy in the United States is energy independence. We don't have to rely on other nations and countries to provide for us. We're able to do it on our own. And I think that could have positive impacts in how we interact with other nations as well. So there's a whole lot more going into it, but that's all part of sustainability as well. I mean, if you're not having to extract resources from halfway across the planet and bring it over here, well, you're already having a positive impact on sustainability.
Gotcha. It's not what I'm gathering or what I'm hearing is like improving like our chain supply of resources and how we're using the energy and how it connects to our grid and being able to be more independent and being a leader in that particular space when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah.
Something, based on your experience within industry, I'm curious about any innovation you've seen, like at all within like the environmental space. If you've seen anything that you find innovative, whether it's in energy, whether it's in where you came from in your background of archaeology, just tapping into some of your experience. We would like to see like a little bit of your insight on innovation in environmental spaces.
I think that there has been improvement in processes for planning projects.
Okay.
So compared to, I mentioned that I started my interdisciplinary career on a solar site.
Hmm.
Compared to how that project was planned, organized, and developed to how we're doing it in the industry now is night and day.
Okay.
There were so many lessons learned early on that it's improved our processes going forward. And I think that's especially true with siting projects. So I'm often involved in conversations where we might have site control, land control for a boundary of land. And we go, okay, well, we can get 250 megawatts of solar out of this. But then as we sit down interdisciplinary, with engineers, the environmental folks, and we really dig into it, we go, well, we need to carve this space out because that's going to have negative impacts to a species of special concern, or this space out because it has cultural resources potential or something like that. And so we keep like playing with the boundaries and playing with the footprint to actually make a project that is more sustainable and has fewer impacts as it's constructed, following decommissioning. And I don't feel like that process was as well developed
Hmm.
15, 20 years ago.
No, I mean, that's really important to highlight. I appreciate you bringing that level of innovation because I know that sometimes when people think of like innovation, they might think of like a product or they might think of something that's different. But the fact that you're talking about like the systems and the planning part, because planning is so important to us getting better at what we're doing. So, like, it's awesome that in that short period of time, like 15 years in my mind isn't that long when it comes to like a discipline. Like, within 15 years, you've been able to see like a change. Like, it's ever evolving. That means that like if you come into industry, you can have an impact on shifting it and it's adaptable to change. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. And I think I've especially seen adaptability to that kind of change in this industry because I've worked in some other
Okay.
industries. I've worked in transportation and a couple other industries, and there are some old sticks in the mud in some of those other industries. And I feel like the culture of, sorry, my earpiece is falling out.
Mhm.
I feel like the culture of people who tend to seek out careers in renewable energy tend to be a little more progressive thinking anyways. So they adopt these processes and being interdisciplinary with other teams and not siloing so much, with a little more grace.
No, I mean, that sounds like it's really flexible. It also sounds like an opportunity that, I know some people are worried about the rise of artificial intelligence. Am I not going to have a job? But this sounds like something that would require people to work together, like using their brains together and allowing you to be able to bring your own creative thoughts and knowledge and experience to it to help the industry move forward. Is that true?
That is true, and there are some tools out there that colleagues in the industry are developing to like automate permitting processes and things like that. But even when I speak with them about it, they usually will highlight the caveat that this is a tool to trim down some of your process, but this isn't a tool to replace your process. Like
Right.
you're still going to need to have people who can analyze the results of
Mhm.
whatever the output is that their tool can provide. So yeah, it still takes interpretation
Right.
from all sectors to make it work.
No, that's helpful. I really appreciate you highlighting that perspective. Um, as I'm thinking here, I'm thinking about like the types of teams you've been able to work on, and you said there's interdisciplinary. And could you just list again, like maybe some of the people that you've gotten to work with? So when you're working on like one of your energy projects.
Sure. So depending on if I'm on the cradle side or the construction side, um, so I've gotten to work with transmission engineers on the early side and project developers, land folks who go out and actually talk to landowners and get
Like acquisition?
leases. Yeah, get leases negotiated. Public affairs. Public affairs is a huge part because everyone is concerned about what's happening in their immediate community. And if you have a large utility scale developer coming to town, especially in these rural areas, they want to know who you are and they
Mhm,
want to know if you're, friend or foe.
mhm.
So public affairs is a huge part, not just at the cradle side, but like throughout the entire process. Um, there's permitting folks, there's stakeholders outside of our company teams. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Reclamation, Bureau of Land Management. I'm trying to come up with more of the federal ones and the state ones. I'm working a lot in California right now, so CDFW and
Mhm.
Arizona Fish and Game. So tribal representatives are definitely
Okay.
brought to the table for consultation. So there a whole lot of groups, and then you have everything that runs any business: your accounting, your supply chain, your logistics folks, operations folks, everyone who just keeps everything running. And it's like I said, you could come from just about any discipline and find a home.
That's awesome. So, in closing, I just wanted to one ask you if there was anything else that you had that you wanted to share with the audience about understanding energy, where's the impact, and why it matters.
I think just reiterating a couple points. One, we need this so bad. And to really highlight the fact that as we're developing these facilities, a lot of conscious thought goes into creating the best facilities we can with everyone's interests in mind, especially environmental interests. Sometimes there are impacts, but we try to mitigate for those as best we can. And really, the when I mentioned about sitting in meetings where we change that footprint over and over, it is iterative and it's expensive to play
Mhm.
that game. But in the end, it's worth it to all of us to do it right and do it right from the beginning.
That makes sense. I think that you highlighting the importance of it being iterative and the expenses because you need to do it correctly. Like now that we have all this information and insight, we know that like from mistakes, like maybe that you learned 15 years ago on some of these solar projects, you don't have to do those
Yeah.
anymore. So you know to take your time on pieces that maybe before we'll get to that later. Like the order wasn't maybe as clear back then, but now we know it's clear. So that's why we know we need to maybe take more time in this particular section. Is that what you're getting at as well?
Yeah. Yeah. We've taken those lessons learned, we've applied them, and we're just getting better at it.
That's awesome. I'm really excited. I'm excited for all those that are interested in joining the energy space. I know that one, you look so happy to be working in the work that you are doing. So I'm going to say that, and that makes me happy because like renewable energy, I know for me has been kind of like a breath of fresh air when it comes to the environmental space, because it's one that some of the things, like you said, the pathways haven't all the way been created yet. We're still working on building, better systems so that we can progress and deploy. So this is like a great industry to get into to do that work. You can be a leader in the space by doing the work, and we really appreciate your leadership, Jessica.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so my last thing is like, if you could tell me, like, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's more to do about like if you've gone to travel anywhere recently or in the past, what's one of the places that you've loved in the world, and just share it with us because we're always curious about where in the environmental spaces that we've been in that maybe you've been to that you enjoy.
I have been fortunate enough to do a lot of traveling.
Well, then you can tell us more than one, but just tell us one. Like, we would love to hear about it.
I'll just bring up something recent
Okay.
because I can't pick favorites.
Okay.
So recently I took a vacation to Guadalajara.
Okay.
And Guadalajara is a beautiful city. It's the second largest city in mainland Mexico. Oh, just lost my earpiece. And having traveled fairly extensively throughout Mexico and even lived in Mexico at certain points in my life, seeing the interconnection between different areas of Mexico, because it's a huge country. Mm-hmm. And I'd been to the Yucatan and been to the Aztec ruins there, the huge pyramids that are so famous. But on this trip to Guadalajara, we were able to go to a site called Guachimantas, which was a smaller, scaled down version of what you might see in the Yucatan Peninsula across the entire country. Mm-hmm. And they had conical pyramid shapes as opposed to your typical straight. Okay. So they're like circles stacked.
Okay.
Yeah, like pogs.
For the steps?
Steps that also you're not supposed to climb. Yeah.
Okay, but like even seeing that, I've never seen that before. That's really cool.
And it isn't something that's on people's radar screen. But it was a beautiful site, and it was really interesting to see the consistencies between a culture that existed 3,000 years later in Yucatan being influenced by this culture across the continent near Guadalajara. And it just kind of reminded me just how connected all of us are.
That's beautiful. I really think that one is the best way to end this episode, because one, the way you described it, I feel like I went there a little bit. So I'm going to have to go one, search that up, put that on the travel list. And two, that's something that we really value at Environmental Answers, is the fact that it is all connected and we're building together like our resistance or our resilience to different things such as climate change. So I just want to thank you again, Jessica, for coming on the Environmental Answers podcast. Our goal is to create more resilient spaces. If anyone's interested in keeping up with you, is the best place to keep up with you is on LinkedIn, or is there some?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a great way to do it.
So if you guys are interested in following the dynamic work that Jessica's doing, please follow her on LinkedIn. Her name is spelled at the bottom. And if you're listening, last name is Auck, so that's spelled Auck. And we ask you to follow her and continue to see the work that she's doing. Thanks for being an environmental leader, Jessica, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Tiana. Thanks for having me on.